The headlights of the SUV behind us kept flashing against the back window like someone was signaling danger. But the real warning was already sitting in my chest, that cold, familiar throb you get when you know something in your life has snapped for good. 3 months ago, on the day I married the love of my life, I stood at the end of a flower-lined aisle and stared at 2 empty chairs with gold-trimmed signs that read "Reserved for Gerald and Pauline Carter." They never walked in. They never called. They never apologized. And I told myself I'd let it go, that letting go was easier than begging for love that had never been freely given. But tonight, as Noah and I drove back from a late dinner, and I scrolled past an old wedding photo in my phone, a notification lit up my screen. My mother had viewed my story, the same mother who had ignored every milestone of my new life. The same mother who could have walked me down that aisle but chose not to. I felt something shift inside me, slow and heavy, like grief turning into steel. I remember the suffocating silence of that day. The sky was bright, the mountains dusted with snow, the music soft and warm. Guests whispered behind their programs. My maid of honor squeezed my hand, afraid I'd collapse. And still those chairs stayed empty, 2 cold, damning monuments to what my parents really thought of my marriage. I pretended I didn't care. I pretended their absence didn't cut into bone. But grief has a way of echoing long after the applause fades. 3 months later, on this crisp Colorado evening, the memories still clung to me like the scent of peonies that had lined the aisle. Noah reached over and brushed his thumb along my knuckles the way he always did when he sensed something shift in me. "You're quiet," he murmured. "I'm remembering," I said, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the car window. I thought it would hurt less by now. He didn't respond with platitudes or dismiss the ache. He just wove his fingers through mine and kept driving headlights rolling over the dark pines ahead. That was Noah, steady, attentive, the kind of man who didn't need grand speeches to make you feel safe. When we pulled into our driveway, a soft golden glow spilled from the porch lights. Our home, our life, the place we'd built together, far away from expectations, judgment, or the constant measuring of worth my parents loved to force on me. I followed Noah inside, hanging my coat, trying to shake off the heaviness pressing against my ribs. We curled up on the couch, the last of our takeout containers, resting on the coffee table. I leaned into his shoulder, just breathing him in. For a moment it felt peaceful, almost normal. Then my thumb brushed the screen of my phone again, and the notification taunted me. "Pauline Carter viewed your story." I let out a humorless laugh. "She still follows me," I muttered. "Let her," Noah said softly. "Watching isn't the same as showing up." But that was the problem. She wouldn't show up, wouldn't call, wouldn't acknowledge she'd abandoned her own daughter, yet she'd still lurk in the doorway of my life like a shadow, the kind that chilled the room but never spoke. The memory of the wedding wound itself tighter around me. I thought I'd buried the pain, but it rose again, the hush that fell over the guests when someone realized the seats in the front row were still empty. The camera briefly catching the 2 placards with my parents' names. The way the string quartet faltered for half a beat, as if even the music lost its footing. And worst of all, the way hope kept tugging at me. Maybe they're running late. Maybe there was traffic, maybe. But the truth had been louder than every excuse. They didn't come because they didn't approve. And they didn't approve because Noah didn't fit inside the tiny world they worshipped, the pristine suburbs, the curated reputations, the obsession with proper matches. Noah shifted his voice low. "What are you really thinking about?" I'm thinking. I swallowed. I'm thinking I can't believe they missed it. The vows, the dance, everything. They missed everything. He rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm and steady. "But I didn't miss it," he whispered. "And I never will." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I'd promised myself I wouldn't let that old wound reopen. But grief is tricky. It comes back the moment you expect quiet. I stood and walked toward the hallway closet. On the top shelf, tucked behind a stack of blankets, was a small ivory box tied with a satin ribbon. I brought it down carefully and placed it on the coffee table. Noah looked up. "You kept that?" I nodded. "It was supposed to be for them. A gift from the bride and groom." He reached out, fingers brushing the ribbon. "You don't have to open it, but I think I need to." Inside were the things I once believed they would cherish. A handwritten letter, a framed photo of us from our engagement shoot, and 2 embroidered handkerchiefs with their initials. A tradition my grandmother started long before I was born. I lifted the letter, unfolding the soft parchment I'd written with trembling excitement months earlier. "Mom and Dad, thank you for shaping me into the woman I am today." The words blurred. I couldn't read further. Noah gently took the letter, set it aside, and pulled me into his arms. "You tried," he murmured. "You gave them every chance." I pressed my face into his chest. "Why wasn't it enough?" "Because nothing ever is," he said quietly. "Not unless they decide you are." We sat like that for a long, still moment. The glow of the lamp cast a warm circle around us, making the rest of the room feel far away. The world felt smaller, quieter, like the 2 of us existed in our own orbit, untouched by the coldness outside. Eventually, I leaned back and looked at him. "Do you think they'll ever reach out?" He hesitated. "Maybe. But I don't know if they'll reach out for the right reasons." Those words lodged deep inside me, uncomfortable but true. After we cleaned up, Noah went to shower. I walked to our bedroom window and looked out at the quiet street. Snow from last night still clung to the rooftops, reflecting the moonlight. A different life would have existed here: holiday dinners, Sunday visits, birthday calls. But that life had never belonged to me. Not really. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. My mother had looked at the wedding highlight video I'd posted 2 weeks after the ceremony, the one she never commented on and pretended not to have seen. She watched it now. That cold throb in my chest returned, but this time it mixed with something steadier, something like resolve. I whispered into the window's reflection, "You don't get to erase me." Later that night, I slipped into bed beside Noah. His arm wrapped around me automatically, the same way it had on the night we returned from our honeymoon, when the silence from my parents hit me like a brick wall. His voice was soft in the dark. "You okay?" I think I whispered. "I'm finally ready to stop waiting for them." He kissed the top of my head. "Good. Because I'm right here." I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his words wrap around the edges of my hurting heart. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something shift inside me. Not the steel of anger, not the ache of longing, but something like forward motion. I didn't know it yet. But this night, this quiet, aching, beautifully ordinary night, was the calm before the storm. Because 3 months of silence from my parents was about to end in the most explosive, unbelievable way. And it would all begin with a single photo of a Bentley. I woke up the morning after our late-night conversation feeling like someone had pressed on a bruise I'd been pretending didn't hurt. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the heater, and the soft sizzle of bacon. Noah was already in the kitchen. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the ache in my chest felt heavier today than it had in weeks. Then I remembered my mother had viewed my story, and somehow that tiny notification had dragged every unhealed wound to the surface. I forced myself out of bed, wrapped a sweater around my shoulders, and padded down the hallway. Noah stood at the stove wearing pajama pants and an old college t-shirt, humming off-key to something on the radio. The sight of him, steady, warm, present, made the air in my lungs loosen. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile that made everything inside me tilt a little. "Morning." I tried to sound normal, but my voice cracked anyway. He turned the burner off instantly. "What happened?" I held up my phone. She watched my story again. The wedding video this time. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the way it always did when my parents made an invisible entrance into our day. "Do you want to talk about it? I don't know what there is to say." They didn't show up to my wedding, and now they're quietly stalking my life from the sidelines. I laughed softly, bitterly. Honestly, it makes me feel pathetic for still wanting them to care. Noah stepped closer, brushing hair away from my face like he was handling something delicate. It's not pathetic, it's human. I leaned into his touch, letting the warmth of his palm ground me. I hate that it still gets to me. I hate that a notification from them can ruin my morning. He kissed my forehead. That's because you're grieving. And grief doesn't follow logic. I looked up at him, imagining for a moment what it would feel like to grow up in a family like his, messy at times, chaotic even, but overflowing with acceptance. Noah's mother called me every week just to ask if I was eating enough. His sister saved a seat for me at every family dinner. His father had offered to walk me down the aisle if mine didn't come. And still I'd held out hope for two people who didn't even bother to RSVP. We sat down for breakfast, but neither of us touched our plates. My mind kept drifting back to the wedding, to the dozen ways I'd tried to excuse my parents' absence. Maybe Dad was sick, maybe Mom had a migraine, maybe their flight was delayed, but the truth was simple and cruel: they'd chosen not to come. When I finally gathered the courage to check my messages, I saw a text from my cousin Hannah. Saw your new post. You looked beautiful. Wish I could have been at the wedding. I frowned. What do you mean, wish you could have been there? She was invited. I texted back immediately. She responded within seconds. Your mom said it was a private ceremony, immediate family only. My stomach dropped. I showed the message to Noah, my hands starting to shake. They lied, I whispered. They told the whole family they weren't invited. Noah's jaw clenched. Emily, they made themselves the victims in a story they broke. I got up abruptly, pacing the kitchen floor. Memories came rushing back, my mother claiming she didn't get the invitation. My father insisting they never received the details, both refusing to confirm dates, dodging every conversation like I was planning a surprise attack instead of a wedding. I sank into a bar stool, overwhelmed. Why would they do that? Why not just admit they didn't want to come? Noah walked over and placed both hands on my shoulders. Because admitting it would require honesty, and honesty would make them look bad. I let out a long, trembling breath. God, I feel like such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're someone who expected basic decency from the people who raised you. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the kitchen, but my thoughts stayed tangled in that one ugly revelation. My parents hadn't just skipped my wedding, they'd rewritten the narrative so no one blamed them. That afternoon I called my younger brother Zach. He picked up on the first ring. Hey, Em. His voice alone made my throat tighten. Can I ask you something? Is this about Mom stalking your wedding video? I froze. You knew, he sighed. She watches your stories all the time. She just doesn't say anything. Something inside me went cold. Why? Because she doesn't know how to admit she was wrong, he said quietly. And Dad doesn't know how to apologize. Did they tell the family they weren't invited? Zach hesitated. Yeah, they said you eloped. That it was last minute. They said they didn't want to intrude. My breath caught. Intrude. It was my wedding. I know, he said, voice cracking. I'm sorry, Em. I should have told you earlier. It's not your fault. It feels like it is. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to steady myself. Did they ever, I don't know, regret it? Zach stayed silent for a long moment. They regretted how it made them look, not what they did to you. I squeezed my eyes shut. I needed them there. I know, he whispered. I needed them there too. The truth of that nearly broke me. Zach had stood alone in the front row on my wedding day, my only blood relative present, while our parents pretended they had nothing to do with us. After we hung up, I walked out the back door onto the porch. The afternoon light stretched long across the yard, cold but bright. I wrapped my arms around myself as if I could hold my heart together with my hands. Noah stepped outside a moment later, quietly slipping his jacket around my shoulders. You're not alone, he murmured. I know. You're allowed to hurt. I know. You're allowed to let them go. I swallowed hard. I don't know how. He slid an arm around my waist, pulling me close. You don't do it all at once. You do it one morning at a time. One choice at a time. I let myself lean into him, fully allowing his warmth to fill the empty spaces inside me. Do you ever think they'll reach out? I whispered. Yes, he said softly. But I don't think it'll be for the reasons you deserve. That startled a laugh out of me, a broken, weary laugh, but real. What does that even mean? It means people like them only look up when something shiny catches their eye. I blinked at him. That's the most poetic way you've ever told me my parents are shallow. He grinned faintly. I learned from the best. I shoved him lightly, then leaned into his chest again, letting the moment settle. We stood on the porch until the sun dipped low, until the cold pushed us back inside, until my pulse finally steadied. The ache was still there, raw, tender, but quieter. I didn't know yet that in a matter of weeks, my life would flip upside down again. That my parents would come roaring back into my world not with love, but with suspicion and entitlement. That one photo of a Bentley would undo 3 months of silence. But for now, I let myself breathe. I let myself feel held. I let myself believe that healing was possible even from the people who broke you first. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows in long amber stripes, lighting up the steam rising from my mug of tea. I sat at the counter, staring at my phone, scrolling through messages I'd been trying to ignore for days. Work emails, a group chat from college friends, a coupon for a makeup store, and nothing from my parents. Not a word, not even a congratulations again from the wedding they hadn't bothered to attend. The betrayal felt strangely dull now, like a wound that had scabbed over but still ached when touched. Noah walked in wearing a half-buttoned shirt and a crooked tie, his hair still wet from the shower. "Morning," he said, leaning over to kiss the side of my head. "Morning," I murmured, my eyes still fixed on the phone. He noticed instantly, because he always did. "You're spiraling." "I'm not," I lied, even though the silence from my parents had turned into its own kind of noise. He straightened his tie in the window's reflection. "Sarah, from my HR team, said the new senior marketing position at your company is opening up. You're perfect for it." I blinked at him. "I didn't even know she knew my name." "She knows your work," he corrected gently. "And so does your boss. Don't shrink to fit what they failed to see in you." He tapped the tip of my nose. "Now drink your tea before it goes cold." I tried to smile back, grateful for his easy warmth. Ever since the wedding, Noah's family had wrapped around me like a soft blanket. His mother Lorraine called me more than my own mother ever had. His sister Kendra adopted me like she'd been waiting for me her whole life. And his dad Walter, he'd offered something I'd never expected, quiet, steady paternal affection. "You're coming Sunday, right?" I asked Noah as he reached for his laptop bag. He nodded. "Mom insists on a big family dinner. She said she's making roast chicken and that chocolate loaf you like." "That sounds perfect." He grinned. "See, we have people who actually show up." It was supposed to be a joke, but it landed somewhere deeper in my chest. I watched him drive away, then brushed crumbs from the counter and tried to shake off the heaviness wrapping itself around me. Later that afternoon, I walked into the office carrying a tray of coffees for my team, hoping the familiarity would ground me. My coworker Lisa waved at me from her desk. "You look tired," she said, eyeing me with concern. "Didn't sleep well." Wedding aftermath, I gave a small nod. The whole office had heard through the grapevine that my parents weren't at my ceremony. Denver's corporate marketing world was smaller than it pretended to be. Lisa hesitated, then added quietly, "Your mom told my aunt you eloped. I don't know if you know that." My heart dropped. What she said, it was last minute, small, private, that she respected your wish for intimacy. Lisa winced. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize she hadn't told you." My vision blurred for a moment, but I steadied myself. "Thank you for telling me," I whispered. On my lunch break, I walked outside into the crisp Colorado air, pulling my coat tighter around me. I sat on a bench overlooking downtown watching cars slide past and thinking about how my parents had rewritten the story of my own wedding. Just like that. Like they had the right. The wind picked up carrying the scent of pine and cold stone, and I felt my eyes fill. I wasn't grieving the parents I had, I was grieving the ones I thought they could be. My phone buzzed. Zach. I answered immediately. Hey, you okay? His voice was cautious as if he already knew I wasn't. I heard what Mom told people. I tried to keep my voice steady. Why would she say we eloped? He sighed. Because it makes them look better than saying they didn't show up. It felt like a punch in the lungs. Did she ever, I don't know, regret it? She regretted not controlling the story, Zach said quietly. Not missing the wedding. I swallowed hard. So she didn't feel guilty. No, he paused. I think they expected you to fail. They thought you'd come running back home with an apology. An apology, my voice cracked. For what? For being happy. For choosing someone outside their little world, he said. You know how they are. I leaned my head back against the bench and closed my eyes. I don't want this to keep hurting. Zach exhaled softly. It hurts because you still love them. Do you? Yeah, he whispered. And I hate that. When I walked back into the office, mascara smudged under my eyes, my boss Olivia intercepted me near the elevators. You have a minute, she asked gently. I nodded and followed her into a small conference room. She closed the door behind us and gave me a long, searching look. You've been carrying something heavy, she said. Whatever it is, don't let it dim what you bring to this place. I blinked at her in surprise. I didn't realize it was that obvious. You're good, she said. Really good. And I've been thinking, she paused. I want you to apply for that senior coordinator role. I think you're ready. Relief and disbelief washed over me at once. Really. But I need your head clear. Whatever storm you're walking through, step out of it long enough to see your own future. Tears welled again, but this time they weren't from hurt. Thank you, I whispered. She squeezed my hand. Go home early today. Be kind to yourself. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had said that to me besides Noah. When I pulled into our driveway that evening, the sun was dipping behind the Rockies, throwing streaks of rose gold across the sky. Noah's car was already parked. The porch lights glowed softly, invitingly, the way I always wished my parents' home had. Inside, Noah looked up from chopping vegetables. There's my beautiful wife, he said, smiling. How was work? I set my bag down and walked straight into his arms. Hard, I admitted. But good things happen, too. He kissed the top of my head. Tell me. And I did. I told him everything about Lisa's comment, about Zach, about Olivia's encouragement. He listened without interrupting, without rushing, without judging. Emily, he said softly when I finished, you're building a life. A real one. A beautiful one. It's okay if there are growing pains. It just feels like I'm losing them, I whispered. Even though they were never really mine to lose. He wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. Then maybe you're not losing anything. Maybe you're making room. For what? For the people who actually love you. I leaned into him, letting his steadiness settle the storm inside me. We cooked dinner together, chopping vegetables, stirring, simmering sauces, bumping hips in the tiny kitchen like two people who'd finally found a home in each other. By the time we sat down to eat, the weight in my chest had loosened enough for me to breathe. Later, we curled up on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching the soft flicker of the fireplace. The night felt warm, safe, and full until my phone buzzed again. Another notification. My mother had viewed my new photo. Again. Something shifted in me, quiet but unmistakable. Not pain this time. Not longing. Something closer to resolve. I turned to Noah. I think I know what I need to do. He squeezed my hand. Whatever it is, I'm with you. And as the fire crackled softly beside us, I finally understood healing doesn't come from waiting for an apology. It comes from choosing a different future. I just didn't know yet how violently the past would try to claw its way back into my life. The morning of our wedding felt like something out of a dream I kept drifting in and out of, too beautiful to be real, too fragile to touch. I woke before the alarm, wrapped in a white robe, standing barefoot by the window of the bridal suite at Mountain View Lodge. The gardens below glittered with dew. Guests were already beginning to gather in the courtyard, and somewhere inside me, beneath all the joy, an ache pulsed like a bruise I'd learned to ignore. 2 empty chairs waited for us at the front row. I tried not to look at them as my makeup artist clipped the final curl into place. I tried not to think about them when my bridesmaids gasped as I slipped into my dress. But pain has a way of staining everything, even lace and silk. Sarah, my maid of honor, knelt behind me, fastening my shoes. "You look like something out of a movie," she whispered. I smiled, but it wavered. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Do you want me to call them again?" "No." My voice came out too quickly. "If they were coming, they'd be here." She didn't argue. She didn't need to. The truth was already hanging between us like a cold draft. A knock came at the door. Lorraine, Noah's mother, peeked in, her eyes softening when she saw me. "Sweetheart," she breathed. "You look radiant." Her voice trembled with emotion so genuine it almost unraveled me. She walked over and took my hands in hers. "I know today is complicated," she said gently. "But we are here, every single one of us, and we love you." My throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered, blinking fast. She squeezed my hands, then stepped back so the photographer could capture the moment, Noah's mother fastening the final button on my dress, tears shining in her eyes, as if she'd known me her whole life. If love was measured by presence, mine was already overflowing. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock in the garden pavilion. By the time we began lining up, sunlight spilled through the glass roof in gold ribbons. Guests murmured with excitement. The string quartet tuned their instruments. Everything felt warm and glowing except those 2 front-row chairs. I pretended not to notice them as the processional music began. Sarah walked out first, radiant in sage green, carrying a bouquet of white peonies. Then came Kendra and my other bridesmaids, their dresses swishing softly against the stone path. Then the doors opened for me, and Noah, waiting at the end of the aisle, lifted his head. The moment his eyes landed on me, the rest of the world dissolved. Every fear, every ache, every abandonment that had carved itself into me over the years fell silent. His expression was pure, unwavering love, full and certain and steady. I felt my breath catch. "Ready?" David, Noah's father, whispered beside me. He'd offered to walk me down the aisle when my own father refused to come. "Yes," I said, my voice small but sure. We stepped forward. The quartet played. My dress brushed the ground like a sigh. My heart pounded in my ears. I forced myself not to look at the empty chairs, but at the last second I did. 2 gold-trimmed placards, 2 seats untouched. The sting was sharp, sudden. David squeezed my arm, grounding me. "Eyes forward," he murmured gently. "He's waiting." And he was. Noah stood at the altar, tears shining in his eyes. The second I reached him, everything eased. David kissed my cheek, placed my hand in Noah's, and whispered, "Take care of her." "I will," Noah said quietly, his fingers closing firmly around mine. The officiant began speaking, but all I could think about was the warmth of Noah's hands, the steadiness in his breath, the way he looked at me, like I was the only real thing in the world. When it came time to say our vows, we turned toward each other fully. "Emily," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you are my anchor, my home, my safe place. I promise to choose you every day. I promise to protect your peace, to fight for your joy, and to build a life with you that feels like freedom." My breath trembled. I spoke my vows through tears. "You've shown me a kind of love I never believed I deserved. You've made me feel seen, valued, cherished. I promise to stand beside you through everything, every triumph, every storm, every quiet morning, and every wild dream." Not a dry eye in the garden. Even the officiant's voice shook when he said, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Noah pulled me into his arms, and as he kissed me, the guests erupted into applause. It echoed off the glass ceiling, bright and full and alive. In that moment, the two empty chairs didn't exist. The reception was a whirlwind, dancing flashes of cameras, the clink of champagne glasses. Laughter filled the hall. Lorraine toasted to us with trembling hands. David hugged me as if I were his own daughter. My bridesmaids pulled me into a circle and screamed with joy when the DJ played our favorite song. But even in the joy, there were shadows. People whispered gently, thinking I couldn't hear. Poor thing, her parents didn't come at all. Such a beautiful wedding. I don't understand how they could miss it. What were they thinking? Each comment pressed against the bruise. Halfway through the night, I slipped into the bridal waiting room to breathe. The fairy lights cast a soft glow. My bouquet rested on the vanity. My veil lay across a chair like a ghost of the girl who had wished for something different. A bridesmaid found me, her face full of concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just needed a minute." She hesitated. "Did something happen?" I thought maybe they got stuck in traffic. I let out a hollow laugh. "They didn't plan to come." Her expression softened with sympathy that made the ache widen. "I'm so sorry." I nodded, swallowing hard. "It's okay. I had everyone I needed." But the lie hung heavy in the air. Later, when the crowd thinned and the music softened, Noah found me standing on the terrace overlooking the mountains. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine. "You disappeared on me," he said, with a gentle smile, sliding his arm around my waist. "I just needed some quiet." He studied my face. "You're thinking about them." "It's hard not to," I admitted. "I know today was beautiful. I know I should be grateful. And I am. But I don't know. It's like part of me is still waiting to be chosen." Noah turned me fully toward him. His voice was soft but certain. "Families like yours care more about image than people. They don't know how to love without conditions. You deserve better than conditional love." I blinked back, the tears gathering in my eyes. "Do you think they'll ever accept us?" He didn't lie. He didn't sugarcoat. He didn't offer hope he didn't believe in. He simply said, "I think their acceptance isn't something we need." I let out a shuddering breath. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said gently. "But I'll walk through all of it with you." The wind rustled through the trees. The terrace lights flickered. Music drifted softly through the open doors. And for the first time that day, the grief softened just a little. Hours later, after the last dance and the final toast, after the lights dimmed and the guests departed, I stood alone in the reception hall. The candles were still glowing. Our cake sat half-eaten. Empty glasses crowded the tables. It looked like the aftermath of a dream. I glanced once more at the chairs in the front row. Still empty, still waiting, still cold. Something inside me shifted, a slow, quiet exhale of acceptance and aching truth. Maybe they would never choose me. Maybe they never intended to. Maybe the unconditional love I'd searched for all my life had been standing beside me all along. Just as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A notification, one I didn't expect. "Gerald Carter viewed your wedding story." My breath caught. Not a call. Not a text. Not an apology. Just silent watching. Silent judging. Silent circling. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know why they were watching. But something told me their silence was about to shatter. And not for the reasons I once hoped. Noah's alarm buzzed softly at 6 in the morning, but I was already awake, staring at the ceiling like the answers to everything wrong in my life might be written up there in the shadows. 3 months of married life, and every morning started the same way. Warmth beside me, peace in the house, and a quiet ache under my ribs that I kept pretending wasn't there. Noah rolled over, still half asleep, and brushed a strand of hair back from my forehead. "Bad dream, just thinking," I whispered. He kissed my temple and slipped out of bed, heading toward the kitchen. A moment later, the smell of coffee drifted through the hallway. I wrapped myself in a cardigan and followed him, watching the man who had become my home move around the kitchen like he'd lived here forever. You should sleep in, he said, pouring my coffee. It's Saturday. I can't shut my brain off, I admitted. His brows softened, the concern in his eyes quiet and steady. Wedding stuff, I nodded, and he didn't push further. Noah had learned early that grief didn't like to be interrogated. While we ate breakfast, my phone buzzed with a work notification. I clicked without thinking and realized it wasn't work at all. A promotion announcement. Senior Marketing Coordinator. My name. I blinked, rereading the email. Noah noticed my stunned silence. Everything okay? I got promoted, my voice cracked. His face lit up instantly, the kind of proud, unfiltered happiness I had never once seen from my parents. That's incredible. I smiled, a real one, but it wobbled at the edges. I texted my mom, I said quietly, just to share the news. And I slid the phone across the table so he could read the reply. Good for you. Hope it's stable. That was it. 4 words. 4 cold-clipped syllables from a woman who used to quiz me endlessly about academic excellence. It wasn't approval. It wasn't pride. It was dismissal, dressed up as politeness. Noah read it and exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. I shrugged, trying to be strong. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. It was the same old pattern, my parents pretending to care just enough to avoid being villains, while making sure I always knew where I fell in their hierarchy of worth. Later that afternoon, I met my cousin Maeve for coffee. She hugged me hard the moment she saw me. I'm so proud of you, she said. Ignore your mom. I stiffened. What do you mean, ignore her? Maeve hesitated, then lowered her voice. She's been telling everyone that your promotion is because your company's trying to boost diversity. My stomach dropped. What? I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought you should know. The pain hit like a wave, sharp, humiliating, hot behind my eyes. Not only had she dismissed my success to my face, but she'd belittled me behind my back, too. My mother's obsession with appearances didn't extend to my accomplishments, only her own. I drove home in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. When I walked into the house, Noah was at his desk reviewing store projections. You're home early, he said, then paused when he saw my face. Emily, what happened? I collapsed onto the couch. She told the family my promotion was diversity optics. Noah's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something sharp, something true, but he swallowed it down because he knew I wasn't ready to hear anger on top of my hurt. Instead, he sat beside me, pressing a kiss to my temple. Your mother doesn't get to define your worth. You earned that promotion through talent, not because your last name is Carter. I let out a shaky breath. I hate that they get to hurt me without even being in my life. You don't have to let them, he murmured. But letting go isn't an overnight process. It's a slow unspooling of threads you didn't even realize were tangled around your heart. 2 days later, the next blow landed. At brunch with extended family, Aunt Helen asked all sweet and curious Emily, honey, why didn't you invite your parents to the wedding? Forks froze. Conversations halted. I did invite them, I said, stunned. They chose not to come. Helen frowned. But your mother said you eloped. There it was. Another lie. Another story rewritten to protect their image. I felt heat crawl up my neck. No. I planned the wedding for 11 months. They knew every detail. Whispers erupted around the table. Noah reached under the table and squeezed my knee, grounding me before I dissolved. When we got home, he sat me down and took my hands in his. You can't keep doing this, he said softly. Letting them rewrite your life. I'm not letting them, I whispered. I'm just tired. He brushed my cheek with his thumb. You deserve peace, not punishment. My phone rang. Zach. I answered quickly. Hey. He didn't waste time. Mom told Aunt Jill you're overwhelmed and making impulsive decisions because married life is stressful. She said your job promotion is a temporary boost. And she said your marriage won't last 2 years. Something inside me cracked cleanly down the middle. What else? I asked, voice thin. Zach hesitated. Dad said when your marriage collapses, they'll help you find someone appropriate. Their words, not mine. The room spun. Noah watched me carefully waiting, hurting with me for me. After I hung up, I sat there in silence until the ticking of the wall clock became unbearable. They want me to fail, I said finally. They're waiting for it. Noah shook his head. They don't know you. They don't know us. I looked at him, my heart flooding with something heavier and deeper than sadness clarity. They don't want me happy. They want me obedient. He didn't argue. Instead, he took my hands, gently lifting them to his lips. Then stop letting them write the story. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, the truth settled over me like a revelation I should have seen long ago. My parents weren't disappointed, they were resentful. Resentful that I had chosen a life outside their control. Resentful that Noah loved me in ways they'd never cared to. Resentful that I wasn't bending to their mold anymore. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every lie they told the family, every backhanded comment, every attempt to undermine my happiness. And for the first time, the ache I carried wasn't just hurt. It was anger. Low, quiet, steady anger. Anger that they had stolen moments from my wedding. Anger that they dismissed my achievements. Anger that they poisoned family conversations behind my back. Anger that they dared to predict the collapse of the marriage that had become the safest home I'd ever known. Noah stirred beside me and pulled me close. "You, okay, I'm getting there," I whispered. But I wasn't okay, not yet. Because the real storm, the one that would rip open every hidden truth, every lie, every assumption my parents had made, was waiting just around the corner. And it was coming with the rumble of an engine. A silver Bentley-shaped storm I didn't yet know was about to upend everything. I woke on my 29th birthday to the soft brush of morning light spilling across our bedroom and the warm weight of Noah's arm draped over my waist. For a moment, everything felt still and quiet, like the world was holding its breath just for me. Then he shifted, kissed the back of my shoulder, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Em." I smiled into the pillow. Already, he murmured. "And I have plans." I rolled over to face him. His hair was a mess. His eyes still sleepy, but the grin on his face said he was up to something. "What kind of plans?" "The kind you're not allowed to question," he said, sitting up and stretching. "Get dressed, something comfortable, and bring sunglasses." Sunglasses. "It's 7 in the morning," he winked. "Trust me." An hour later, we were driving through the hills outside Oak Valley Music. Low windows cracked just enough to let in the crisp spring air. Noah kept glancing at me like he was fighting not to spill the surprise. I kept my eyes on the landscape, rolling green hills, sunlight curling over pine trees, but the suspense was starting to get to me. "Noah," I teased, nudging his arm, "if you bought me a llama or something." "I swear," he burst out laughing. "A llama, really?" "You have that face," I insisted. "The face of a man who's done something questionable." "You'll see," he said, pulling into a long driveway lined with polished stone and glass. It took me a moment to register the sleek modern building at the end, and then I saw the rows. And rows, and rows of luxury cars. "No," I whispered. Noah parked. "Yes, Noah, yes." My hand flew to my mouth. "You did not bring me to a luxury dealership." He looked far too pleased. "Come on." Inside, the building gleamed. Chrome, marble, glass, everything sharp and bright. The air even smelled expensive. A tall woman in a navy suit approached with a knowing smile. "Miss Green," she said warmly. "It's ready." Ready, my pulse skipped. We walked toward the center of the showroom where a spotlight glowed softly over something silver and impossibly elegant. A Bentley Continental GT, perfectly detailed, ribboned, waiting. I froze. "No," I said again, breathless. "No, absolutely not." Noah stepped behind me, hands resting at my waist. "You've talked about this car for years." "Not seriously," I protested. "Not like this. You pointed at one in a magazine 2 years ago and said it was your dream car." His voice softened. "I listen when you talk about your dreams." I blinked suddenly, overwhelmed. Noah, this is too much. This is insane. It's not too much, he murmured, turning me gently to face him. You deserve beautiful things, Em. You deserve joy. You deserve to feel celebrated. He reached into his pocket and held out a small black key fob with the Bentley logo. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I covered my face with both hands and cried, right there in the showroom, full-on embarrassingly emotional tears. Noah pulled me into his arms and laughed softly into my hair. You're making the sales team nervous, he teased. I'm making myself nervous, I sniffed. Are you sure we can afford this? He tilted my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. I promise you we're more than fine. Something in the way he said it, calm, grounded, unshakably sure, hit deeper than the gift itself. Because I knew he wasn't reckless. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't insecure or showy. He just loved me hard. And he could finally afford to do big, impossible things. For me, for us. We spent the rest of the morning driving the Bentley through winding mountain roads. Sunlight glinted across the hood. The engine purred. Wind tangled my hair. My laughter filled the air like I hadn't laughed in months. It felt like freedom. It felt like healing. It felt like the first version of my birthday I'd ever had that wasn't shadowed by my parents' expectations. By evening, when we pulled into our driveway, I still couldn't believe the car was mine. Noah insisted on taking a photo of me leaning against it. Smile, he said. I can't feel my face, I admitted. Just look at me, he said softly. So I did. And the smile came naturally. I posted the photo an hour later. Just a simple caption, best birthday ever. Beyond grateful. Number Bentley, number dream gift, number feeling loved. I put the phone down and didn't think about it again. Not until 6 the next morning. When my phone started buzzing non-stop. 39 missed calls. Most of them from my mother, a handful from my father, 4 from my aunt, and a text from my mom that made my stomach twist tight. Where did that car come from? Followed immediately by call me now. I hadn't heard from her in 3 months. Not after the wedding, not after the promotion, not after any of the milestones she should have cared about. But a Bentley, suddenly I existed. Noah walked into the bedroom holding a mug of coffee, hair still messy from sleep. Everything okay? I showed him my screen. His eyebrows lifted. 39 missed calls. 39, I echoed. We stared at the phone together. I could practically hear my mother's voice through the screen, sharp, suspicious, cracking with panic. Noah put a hand on the back of my neck, grounding me. You don't have to answer. She's going to keep calling, I whispered. Then let her. Another buzz. Then another. A text from Dad this time. We need to talk. This is serious. I swallowed hard. They think something's wrong. They think something illegal. Noah corrected softly. The truth I already knew hung in the air like smoke. If Noah had bought me a bouquet, silence. A bracelet, polite disregard. A new house, mildly suspicious maybe. But a Bentley, sudden wealth, real wealth, was not something they believed a man like Noah should have. My chest tightened. They're panicking. He brushed his thumb along my arm. Let them. It's going to get ugly, I said quietly. His voice was gentle but unwavering. Then, let it get ugly. We've survived worse. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, at the flood of missed calls, at the messages from people who had ignored my entire wedding, but now wanted immediate explanations. No, not explanations. Control. They wanted control back. They wanted the narrative back. They wanted me back on the leash. Something inside me hardened, slow and steady. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't dressing my worth in their expectations. Noah sat beside me, his hand sliding into mine. Whatever happens next, he murmured. We face it together. I leaned against him, letting his warmth settle my breath. Outside, the sunlight touched the Bentley's hood, turning the silver paint into a mirror of morning sky. Beautiful, defiant, a declaration, the kind of gift you don't hide. The kind that makes certain people pick up the phone 39 times in a row. I lifted my head, wiped my eyes, and whispered, Okay. Noah watched me carefully. Okay, I nodded. Call them, I said. Let's hear what they've been dying to say. The phone rang again before I even had time to steady my breath. The sound sliced through the quiet of our bedroom like a blade, shrill, insistent, vibrating with all the urgency of people who had ignored me for months and suddenly believed they had the right to demand answers. I pressed accept. My mother didn't even wait for a greeting. Emily Ann Carter, what on earth is going on? Her voice was sharp, breathless, like she'd been sprinting. Panic, but not the loving kind. The possessive kind. The controlling kind. I swallowed. Good morning, Mom. Don't patronize me, she snapped. Where did you get that car? A Bentley, Emily, a Bentley? Do you have any idea how that looks? I stared out the window at the sunlight hitting the hood of the car, turning it silver gold. It looks like my husband gave me a birthday gift. That's impossible, she hissed. I went silent. I said it's impossible, she repeated. Noah works at some, tech store. Whatever it is not the kind of job that buys luxury vehicles. There it was. Not concern. Not curiosity. Assumption. Assumption that Noah couldn't possibly provide luxury without suspicion attached. Assumption that my marriage was a fraud the moment it didn't fit her worldview. Mom, I said slowly, you don't know anything about Noah's business. I know enough, she fired back. Enough to know something is wrong. Something doesn't add up. It's too much money too fast. You have to think, Emily. You have to be logical. What if he's involved in something criminal? My breath left my lungs in one expelled gasp. You think my husband is a criminal because he bought me a gift? If it walks like a duck, Emily, do not finish that sentence. I'm trying to protect you, she insisted. You are my daughter. If there's illegal money, if you're associated with something shady, do you realize you could be implicated? That car is a red flag. We are having a family meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. You and Noah will attend. This isn't optional. My hands shook with anger. A family meeting? You skipped my wedding. That is unrelated, she snapped. This is serious. You're not entitled to answers, I said quietly. Her voice sharpened to a knife's edge. If he's dragging you into some kind of scheme, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother. My phone buzzed immediately. Dad. Then again. A long text, we need transparency. You owe us clarity. That car raises concerns. Noah stepped into the doorway as I stared at the messages, my pulse pounding in my temples. He didn't speak. He just waited, giving me space to find the words. They think you're a criminal, I whispered finally. His jaw clenched not in anger but in hurt. Deep, quiet hurt. The kind that made my chest tighten. I'm sorry, he said softly. Don't apologize. Tears blurred my vision. You didn't do anything wrong. He walked over and sat beside me, pulling me gently onto his lap like I might break apart if he didn't hold me together. They ignored our wedding, I said. Ignored every milestone. Ignored our life. But one car, and they show up with pitchforks. They don't see me, he murmured. They've never really tried to. I see you, I whispered fiercely. Everything you are, everything you built. He rested his forehead against mine. Then, their opinion doesn't matter. A tear slipped down my cheek. It matters that it hurts. His arms tightened around me. That part I understand. We sat there for a while, the room quiet except for my uneven breathing. When I finally calmed, Noah brushed my cheek with his thumb. What do you want to do? He asked. The question sat heavy between us. I could ignore them. I could block their numbers. I could pretend the calls never happened. But a part of me, the wounded part, the abandoned part, needed to confront this. Needed to stop letting them rewrite the narrative of my life. I want to go, I said. To the meeting, yes. My pulse steadied. I want them to see us. To see who you actually are. To stop making assumptions because they never bothered to ask. He nodded slowly. If that's what you want, I'm with you. My phone buzzed again, a new text from Dad. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. We expect you. I typed 3 words back. We'll be there. For the rest of the evening, my parents called, but I didn't answer. They left voicemails full of escalating urgency. My mother's voice rising, my father's becoming clipped and stern, as if I were a reckless teenager again, instead of a grown woman with a mortgage and a marriage and a life built from love, rather than fear. At 11 p.m., I finally turned off my phone. Noah wrapped his arms around me from behind as we got into bed. "What are you thinking?" "That they're not panicking for me," I murmured. "They're panicking because something happened outside their control." He kissed the top of my head. "They're about to learn control is something they never really had." I exhaled, tension unwinding slowly. "You know what's ironic, For 39 calls straight, my mother wasn't asking if I was happy, or safe, or celebrating. She just wanted to know where the money came from." Noah's voice deepened, soft but edged with steel. "We'll show them tomorrow. Not with aggression, not with anger, with truth. And when they realize the truth," I asked, "then they'll see the consequences of their assumptions." I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet, "They think they're about to interrogate us." He smiled against my temple. "Let them think it." Because neither of us knew it then, but the next day would be the day everything flipped, the day their narrative unraveled, the day their arrogance collided with reality, the day they discovered exactly who Noah Green really was, and that discovery would burn away every lie they'd been telling themselves and everyone else since the wedding. "Get some sleep," Noah whispered. "Tomorrow we walk into the storm." But tonight, in his arms for the first time in a long time, I felt steady, ready, and very, very done being underestimated. We arrived at my parents' house at 2:45, the silver Bentley gliding to a stop in the very driveway where I had learned to ride a bike, scraped my knees, and once dreamed of being someone they would be proud of. Now the gleaming hood reflected their immaculate lawn and perfectly trimmed hedges, an image of control, order, and appearances. Noah turned off the engine. Silence wrapped around us. "You ready?" he asked softly. I stared at the house, the white pillars, the polished windows, the front door painted a shade of blue my mother called refined. The same blue she always said didn't suit me because it washed me out. "I've been ready for this conversation my whole life," I said. Noah squeezed my hand. "Then, let's go." We stepped out, the sun catching the Bentley's chrome details, throwing little sparks of light across the driveway. I could practically feel my mother's nose twitching behind the curtains like a bloodhound catching the scent of money. She opened the door before we reached the porch, as if she'd been standing there waiting, listening for the sound of tires. Her eyes flicked immediately to the Bentley, then to my dress, then to Noah. Her face was pinched with tension, but she forced a tight smile. "Emily, Noah." Her tone was clipped, formal, nothing like family. "Come in, your father is waiting." The living room was staged, immaculate, cold. My father stood beside the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, like he was about to deliver a presentation to shareholders. Sarah sat curled on the edge of the sofa, eyes full of guilt and worry. I crossed the room and hugged her tightly. "You didn't have to come," they insisted, she whispered. "They said this concerns the whole family." Translation: they wanted a witness when they went on the attack. Noah and I sat on the love seat across from my parents. The seating arrangement was painfully intentional: 2 sides, 2 teams, 2 worlds. My father cleared his throat. It was the same sound he'd make before grounding me as a teenager. "Emily," he began, "we asked you here because recent events raise concerns." Concerns. The way he said the word was so loaded it could have sunk a ship. "The car," he continued. "The lifestyle changes. Your posts. Like Instagram was a criminal record. We're worried," my mother added, folding her hands like a concerned socialite. "About the source of this sudden wealth, about what it might mean for your safety." I stared at her, stunned by how perfectly she could play the role of the caring mother she hadn't bothered to be in months. "You're concerned," I repeated slowly. "After missing my wedding, after ignoring every milestone of my life, now you're concerned." My mother didn't flinch. "This is different." "How?" Silence. Then she looked directly at Noah. We need transparency, she said. We need to understand your business operations. My pulse sharpened, anger blooming hot under my ribs. His what? Dad stepped in. Young men your age don't typically have the income for a Bentley. Unless the revenue streams are unusual. There it was. They wouldn't say it outright. But the implication was loud enough to shake the walls. Unusual, Noah, repeated his voice, calm and measured. You mean illegal? Nobody spoke. Because the truth sat right there in the room, choking the air. They didn't think a man like Noah could make that kind of money, honestly. Finally, Noah leaned back slightly, crossing one ankle over his knee in a posture of composed authority. You're right, he said quietly. It's not typical for someone my age to afford a Bentley. My mother's eyes widened with vindication. But then again, Noah continued, most people my age aren't featured in this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a magazine. Forbes. He placed it on the coffee table, flipping it open to a 2-page spread. And there it was, his professional headshot. The headline, The Retail Revolution, How Noah Green Built a Mu, LTIMILLIONDO tech chain before 30. The room went silent. My mother's mouth fell open. My father leaned forward, squinting at the pages like they were written in alien hieroglyphics. Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth, trying and failing not to smile. Noah spoke evenly, his voice polite but firm. Green Audio and Tech now has 18 stores. Revenue projections estimate $48 million this year. I signed a venture partnership last month to expand nationally. Everything is completely transparent. Documented. Public. He tapped the page lightly. You could have found all of this with a single Google search. My parents stared at the glossy spread like it was radioactive. My father finally managed all those stores. They're yours, yes. He swallowed. Your worth. That's private, Noah interrupted. But enough that a Bentley is not unusual. My mother inhaled sharply as if her heart rate couldn't keep up with the information slamming into it. You're in Forbes, she whispered. Noah nodded politely. Several times, actually. My father's face colored shock, embarrassment, and something like dawning realization, all fighting for space. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but razor-edged. So let's be clear. You assumed Noah was doing something illegal because you never bothered to ask a single question about who he actually is. Dad opened his mouth, closed. It opened it again. We didn't assume. Yes, I said sharply. Yes, you did. My mother pointed weakly to the magazine. Why didn't you tell us? Noah's eyebrows lifted slightly. Would it have mattered? Her face twisted at the honesty of that question. I pressed on. You didn't want to know him. You didn't care who he was. Not his degree. Not his business. Not his character. You decided after one dinner that he wasn't good enough. Mom's voice went thin. We were trying to protect you. No, I said. You were trying to protect your image. Her eyes filled with tears, not remorse, but humiliation. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected. There's a difference. Dad finally spoke, his voice small. We should have trusted you. You should have treated my husband like a human being. The words hit like stones. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then my mother whispered, Emily, we're so sorry. But the apology felt paper-thin, like a Band-Aid slapped over a bullet wound. I stood the room feeling suddenly too small, too heavy. We're done here. Dad rose quickly. Wait, we want to make this right. You can't make right what you never tried to understand. I took Noah's hand and turned toward the door. Mom's voice shook behind me. Please, give us a chance to fix this. I didn't turn around. Some things can be fixed. Some things can be forgiven. Some things can be rebuilt. But not this. Not the way they'd treated Noah. Not the way they'd rewritten my wedding into a lie. Not the way they only came running the second they smelled money. Not the way they looked at him and had always looked at him before they knew his bank account. At the door, I paused just long enough to say, you apologized to his success. Not to him, and definitely not to me. Then Noah opened the door, and together we stepped out into sunlight, leaving my parents standing in the ruins of their own prejudice. Tomorrow they would try again. Tomorrow they would rewrite the narrative. Tomorrow they would start pretending they'd always seen his worth. But today, the truth finally stood in the room with them, and they couldn't look away. Noah didn't say a word during the drive home. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on my knee, grounding me, steadying me, letting me feel without needing to explain. The silence between us wasn't cold, it was warm, protective, the kind of silence that lets emotions settle instead of spilling everywhere. But once we pulled into our driveway, once the Bentley eased to a stop, and the engine went quiet, the weight of everything we just walked through hit me all at once. I exhaled shakily. I didn't think it would feel like that. Noah turned toward me. Like watching them realize the things they assumed about you were wrong. Like seeing the shock in their eyes, I swallowed hard, like I finally understood how deep their prejudice goes. Noah brushed his thumb over my hand. You didn't want to see it before. I still didn't want to see it today, I whispered, but it was right there, in their faces. We stepped inside the house and I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Noah set the magazine he'd shown them, his Forbes spread on the coffee table, as if it were nothing more than a grocery flyer. You still okay with going? He asked gently. With confronting them like that, I needed to, I said softly. For both of us. He sat beside me, one arm draped across the back of the couch. It's not your job to fix their worldview, Em. Or their character. I know. I stared at the ceiling for a moment before admitting, but part of me hoped, I don't know, that they'd see who you are and feel ashamed. He shook his head. People don't change because they're ashamed. They change because they want to. My phone buzzed again on the table. Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. Call me. We should talk. We need to clear the air. Dinner Sunday. Let's rebuild as a family. Noah is welcome. Welcome. As if they were granting him access to a private club. I turned the screen off. That evening, after I had showered and changed into soft pajamas, Noah came into the bedroom carrying 2 mugs of tea. They're not done, he said quietly. I know. They're going to keep trying.